All right, guys, it's been a while since I've made an instructional video, but we have started second semester and we're ready for some new assignments. So today we're going to review some basic watercolor techniques that you can incorporate into your paintings. So the first thing I want you to do is find a blank journal page. Once you have that journal page, you are going to need a ruler and a pencil. Now remember to pause this as needed. You can also slow it down using the settings if I'm going too fast. And of course you can always ask me in class. So I am going to measure the width of my journal. My journal up to the wires is 5 inches. So if I divide that in half, that's 2.5. I mark 2.5 at the top. And I come down to the bottom and I mark 2.5 at the bottom, okay? Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lightly connect those with my pencil so that I have a line dividing my paper in half. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to be using a roll of drafting tape. You definitely don't want to use duct tape or scotch tape. This is drafting tape, similar to masking tape, and this is what I'm going to be using. So you will have access to this in class. And I'm going to just kind of eyeball here how much I'm going to need. Now, if you are worried that this is going to tear your page, it shouldn't. But one thing you can do is press it to your clothes first. It just picks up a little bit of lint from your clothes to make it just a little less sticky. And then you can put it on. So what I'm going to do is I am going to cover that line up that I just drew with my drafting tape. Okay, so I'm going to press that in place, like so, and I am running my fingers over top of it. Okay, and I'm going to use a pair of scissors, and I'm going to snip that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be dividing this up into 6 different sections, 3 on each side, and for this I'm just going to put the tape in various locations. So you can do it the same as the way I am, or you can come up with your own division. So I'm going to make 1 here. I'm going to press that down firmly. And another one here. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Remember, you can pause this. And I'm going to put this one here. So pause it if I'm going too fast or you need a minute because you've got to grab some supplies. I'll do one. I'm just pressing the tape firmly in place. And you are going to want to do that as well to help keep your journal page looking pretty nice. All right, so let's talk about all the other materials we're going to need today. Obviously, you're going to need watercolors if this is watercolor technique. I'm going to be using some liquid watercolors, which we'll use in class on a project. If you don't want to use those, you can use your pan watercolors. Those are the ones that come in the sets that you get. Obviously, you will need water and a brush. You are also going to need rice, which I will provide to you in class, some kosher salt, which I will also provide, rubbing alcohol. This is not water, this is rubbing alcohol, a tissue, a piece of plastic wrap, and a piece of bubble wrap, and a Q-tip, if I didn't say that already. Okay, so let's go ahead and do our first one. I'm going to pick one of the colors. Now you could use the same color for each one. You could use different colors. You can repeat colors. I am going to start with blue, and I'm going to do this right across the top, and I can go right up to the edge of the tape. If a little bit gets on the tape, hopefully it's not the end of the world, especially if you press down pretty firmly. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and rinse my brush out. And for this one, I'm gonna start with my tissue. This is just a little bit of a lift technique. I'm just gonna go straight down and lift straight up. Okay. And I'm not gonna do the whole entire block or square. I'm just gonna do parts of it. Okay, so this is called a tissue lift technique. So each time I did that, I made sure that I was using a clean part of a tissue. All right, let's go ahead and do our next one. I'm gonna wash my brush out really well using a figure 8 in my water. And I'm gonna go ahead and set up my next one. So let's go ahead and do purple. And I'm using a fairly large brush for this because I don't have any small details to worry about on this side. Okay, let's go ahead and see what the rubbing alcohol looks like. So I'm just going to take my Q-tip, dip it into the rubbing alcohol, and dot that on there. Another thing you could do is if you had a clean brush or 2 brushes or a clean brush and a pencil. Let's see if I can do this neatly without getting it on anything else. You can take your brush, dip it in the rubbing alcohol, and then gently, but just in the box you're currently working on. Okay, so that's a rubbing alcohol technique. So you see what it looks like with the Q-tip and then what it looks like when you're using the brush and pencil technique. All right, I'm gonna wash my brush out really, really well, especially if I just used it in rubbing alcohol. Might even need to change my water, we'll see. And I'm going to do the next one. So for the next one, I'm gonna do magenta. And I'm just gonna paint that in quickly. Okay, so for this one, let's go ahead and do the plastic wrap technique. I'm gonna add a little bit more color to this before I do it. Okay. And essentially what I'm gonna do is take a piece of plastic wrap. I'm gonna cut it a little bit smaller with my scissors and tear it too, especially if your scissors aren't cutting so well, like mine. And I'm going to crinkle it up a little bit, and then I'm going to crinkle it onto there like that. And I'm not going to move it around, and I'm not going to take it off. I'm just going to let that dry on there. I'll show you what that looks like once it's done. Okay? So I'm going to press that. The key here is that you don't want this laying nice and smooth. Okay? So make sure that you are putting it on there crinkly. All right, moving and grooving. Next one, I'm gonna wash my brush out. Make sure your brush is really clean. If you need to get a paper towel to wipe it on to see if it's clean, you should do that. I'm gonna go ahead and repeat blue. Let's see, I guess I'll work from the top down. Probably best to do it that way, so I'm actually going to use magenta again. So I'm going to go ahead and do magenta up here. Okay, and let's say I haven't done couple of these yet, so let's see which one I want to do. We'll go ahead and do rice on this one. So, as I mentioned, you'll get rice from me in class. While that's wet, you're just gonna scatter some rice and then you're not going to touch it or move it. You're just going to let it dry wherever it fell. Okay? You don't need to cover the whole entire thing. All right, we're going to let that do its thing. The next thing we're going to do is, let's go ahead and do our purple again. I'll do that in the middle. I'm not sure I pressed that part on. A little corner of plastic wrap out of it. Let's go ahead and use our salt technique. So make sure that that's really wet. You don't want that to dry. I shouldn't say really wet. I should just say make sure it's not dry. Okay, and then we're going to use a little bit of our kosher salt, and we're going to be careful to only get it on to the area that it's wet currently. So try and keep it off of your other ones. And then again, like I said before, you're not going to move this around. You're not going to push it with your fingers. You're literally just going to put it on there and let it dry and do its thing. Okay? Now what we're going to do is we're going to come down to our last one. I'm going to go ahead and rinse that out, my brush, that is. I'm going to paint this blue. Oh, I'm just going to let that go. So you'll see that I got a little bit of blue under the saran wrap and it pulled it in. It's not the end of the world. This is just to practice the techniques and see what they do. So if yours isn't perfect, it's not a big deal. Okay? Don't worry about that. Alright, for this next one, I'm going to use bubble wrap. So I'm just going to cut a square that's about the same size. If it's a little bigger or a little smaller, it's not the end of the world. And I'm going to go ahead and press that on there. So I press it down firmly without popping it, and then I just leave it alone. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to leave all of these alone, and I'm going to let them dry, and then we're going to look at the results, and we're going to label these, and we're going to take off the tape and do all these fun things. Or at least I think they're fun, but I'm definitely an art nerd. So, okay, we're going to leave this alone, and we'll come back to it in an hour or so when it's dry. Okay guys, so it's been about an hour, and for the most part my watercolors should be dry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start carefully taking off the plastic. So you can see the effect of the plastic wrap and our bubble wrap. And then let's go ahead and do our rice. Okay, and the salt. If it bothers your fingers, you could use an eraser gently or a tissue. A nice neat pile so that that can easily get put into the garbage. Okay, so now what we can do is we can take off our tape. So when you're taking off the tape, you always want to take it at an angle. So you see how I'm putting this on an angle like this, and I'm going to gently pull off each piece of tape. So I'm always pulling slowly and at an angle. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to label each technique. Okay, so our first technique that we used was a tissue lift technique. So I'm going to grab a pen and I'm going to write that out. Now you can use stencils, you can use pencils, fancy handwriting, regular handwriting, whatever you want, but we do want to document what the process was. Okay, so this was my tissue. And again, however you choose to write out what it is fine. The next one, I'm going to double check my spelling. So I was a terrible speller as a kid, and I always spell alcohol wrong. So the next technique was rubbing alcohol. So I'm going to go ahead and okay. And for this next one, this plastic wrap. So I'm going to label it on the side. Okay. And to be honest, I'm not going to be looking at your spelling. I just want to make sure you label what everything is so that you remember. Then we have our rice, our salt, and our bubble wrap. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to erase that line. And we'll take a closer look at each of these. So let's just go ahead and zoom in a little bit so you can see what each one looks like. Okay, so we have our tissue lift. We have our rice, salt, plastic wrap, rubbing alcohol, and our bubble wrap. So each one gives you a different effect, and we're going to be using these in a painting, which is why we just learned how to do this. All right, so I hope you had fun with this and get ready for the next video.